So our second presenter is Prerna Bhagi, who is a protection manager at Active. She'll focus on her work in Libya and how mental health situates itself in the humanitarian response sector. Prerna, over to you.
Hi, everybody. So I'm going to keep it very short, and I'm hoping that through the questions is when I can sort of like elaborate more on the work that we do here. I just wanted to thank Andy for like her presentation. It was very insightful, and I think like it was a good learning even for other like professionals who are trying to increase or at least pursue better mental well-being. Um, I'm just going to start off with a quick overview into what is the workspace that we're looking at. So if we could go into the next slide. I currently work on humanitarian response for Libya. So it's a country that's been in conflict since 2011, since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi. So it's a very fluid context. You're looking at a lot of different political actors involved. There's massive amounts of displacement that's taking place within the country, and there's active conflict, which means that there's a lot of violation of human rights and international humanitarian law taking place currently. So it's not a normal context at all, which means that the sort of stressors that you would have, which would have an impact on your mental health, are already very, very enhanced. So that's the sort of like baseline that we are, looking at. Then if we could move on to the next slide, please. So the reason why I have this pyramid in place is to actually help situate how is it that mental health is seen in Libya. So just for the definition, I'm using the definition that the WHO uses, which is that um, for them, the indicators for what is good mental health or what is seen as like good well-being is that you're able to realize your own potential as an individual. You're able to cope with the normal stresses of life. You're able to work productively and fruitfully, and that you can contribute better to your society. So I'm kind of going to use these 4 indicators to try and see how is it that we're using this in our workspace here. So currently the program that I'm managing, it looks at sort of monitoring what are the severe risks that vulnerable populations are facing. And it's a team of 8 people that we're working with currently, 8 very beautiful, diligent, amazing people that I have a lot of respect for. But because they are working on these really, really sensitive issues, it becomes all the more important for me to monitor how is it that they are doing on a daily basis. One other thing which I should mention is that it's a form of working which is remote. So that means that I don't have direct access to the staff that I'm working with on a daily basis. A lot of it is happening virtually, like over Skype, over emails, and that makes it all the more difficult to monitor mental health. But just if you notice, and if you look at this pyramid, it says that when it comes to specialized service provision for mental well-being generally in Libya, 52.8 of those services are based on community and family supports. Now, one of this is due to the lack of funding. There isn't enough funding to actually put in place specialized services, but also that there is, as has been mentioned and as is a continuing sort of stream in all the presentations, a social stigma attached to accessing mental health. So specialized service provision is not something that people will reach out to immediately. And this is something that's very important for all of us to understand, because when, in the humanitarian sector, a lot of times we bring in these concepts or we bring in these themes which may be alien to a particular context. So for example, for Libyans to be talking openly about mental health is not something that's normal to them. So that's something that we also need to like remember as we go forward. So if you could move on to the next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about what is it that we've been doing internally as an organization or as a team to try and increase the mental well-being of the staff that I work with. So these are people who are working 24/7 with very vulnerable population. So there's a lot of secondary trauma that they are also absorbing on their daily basis. I'm so sorry, I had a little bit of an issue. So I will start off with the case study. So this is just a very simple way of sort of formalizing hobbies that people have. It's called the hobby promise. And basically what we did was that at the starting of the year, we had a discussion about, we all met together and we had a discussion about what are the kind of hobbies that each of these staff members, so each of actually they're all my friends now, all of them pursue outside of their work. And whether is it that these are hobbies that they've continued, whether is it that these are hobbies that they've discontinued, what is it that they need to better pursue pursue these hobbies. So if that means that, for example, they need 2 days off because they want to actually go and play a volleyball competition, I, as a manager, or I, as someone supervising them, should be allowed to, give them that leave so that they can actually pursue that hobby further. And this is important to actually make them, I mean, they're all people who know what their potential really is, but to actually give them the space to better realize their potential. A bigger strain or a bigger element that everyone needs to remember is the fact that, and I think this is true for, all the work that all of us are doing, that there isn't enough formal funding for us to take care of staff internally within organizations. So a lot of the work that we do is informal initiatives that we are taking to make sure that people that we are working with on an everyday basis can have a better access, to opportunities to increase their mental health. So this is the one thing that we've been doing, and it requires me to sort of monitor and follow up with them every 3 months as to where is it that they've reached with their hobby. So, for example, if someone is a poet and really likes writing poetry, every 3 months I actually have to check on them and see whether or not they have been writing poetry, and if there is an output they would like to share with the rest of the team. So this is the first time that we've implemented this in at least our operations, and I'm actually very curious to see over a longer period of time if this is actually something that can potentially help like our staff, and whether or not there can be opportunities to make it more formal and actually put it under a funding stream in the future. So then moving on to the next slide. The second element of what constitutes better mental well-being is whether or not you can cope with the normal stresses of your life. Now, with the kind of work that I am doing and the kind of work that our staff is doing, it's very difficult to actually identify what is really normal. And to sort of demonstrate that, I have like a small anecdote to share. And this is when I was myself working, as a caseworker in Greece, in the refugee camps, in different parts of Greece. I remember we used to go to the camp every day in the morning, and then we used to come back, and our supervisor would force us to go to the beach every day in the evening. And for me, that was very, very unusual because it's a very contrasting environment. You're going during the day and you're doing this very intense work. You're helping people deal with their trauma. You're doing all these distributions. And in the evening, we're just sitting and, having a really nice time. And there was something about it which I found very vulgar. And I actually found it very, very contrasting. And I remember I went and I talked to my supervisor, and she just simply told me, and this is something that Anand mentioned at the starting of his snippet, was the fact that you can't take care of other people if you can't take care of yourself. So self-care becomes really, really important. Like, it's a priority that you should be giving to yourself. And which is why she was like, if I don't push you to pursue this general like activity which can actually help you feel better, you're not going to go back to the camp tomorrow, or even if you go back, you're not going to do a decent job at the work that you're actually supposed to do. So I think it's like the contrasting nature which actually helps you realize better when is it that you're displacing feelings and when is it that you're not. So even with my own team, like, I really like push them to like not work on the weekends, or try and do like, take vacations, go to nice places whenever they can, just so that, they're very aware of what they're feeling, and whenever is it that their sort of emotions and feelings are transcending into their actual work. Yeah, we can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so the third sort of like pillar is that you can work productively and fruitfully. And I think this is where everyone who works in the humanitarian sector and everyone who even works in the development sector needs to take responsibility for, even at a supervision or at a managerial like level, because I think there needs to be an understanding of how much hard work is actually going in on a daily basis. So that means that for me, I need to understand how much work is being put in by each case worker who is working on different like complicated cases, to ensure that they are not, they're not overworked, they're not overburdened. And the only way that I can do that is by establishing communication and by establishing trust. So, for example, a staff member shouldn't feel that they're not able to tell me when is it that they're feeling overburdened, because that will actually have an impact on the next appraisal that happens, or the contract that gets renewed for them. for them to complain or for them to talk about them feeling very, very overworked or feeling overstrained is not a reflection of the work that they do. It's a simple, and not a simple, I would say, but it's a basic, like, result of the work that you do, and there should be channels for them to communicate this to me. So communication is very important in this. Then second is the simple fact that, just linked to the part in communication, it's important for someone who's supervising a team to communicate to them that there are limits to how much you can help people, and where is it that your responsibility really stops. So yes, it's true that you might have been able to give someone some sort of psychosocial support, someone, for example, a woman who has been separated from her children, but there's only to a certain extent that you can help her find her child, and that limit is not something that you can change. So it's very, very important to sort of make that very, very clear to someone. And then thirdly is the fact that there shouldn't be any fear on like reprisals. So as I said earlier, like if someone feels overburdened, they should be able to come and talk to us about it. And for me as a manager, then it's very important to also take the pressure, for example, from a higher level. When someone tells me that, okay, we need to do this very big distribution, can you do it in the next like 10 days? That's when it becomes my responsibility as someone who's aware of my own mental health and who's responsible for taking care of the mental health of everyone that I work with, to push back on it and say that actually we won't be able to do it in 10 days. We'll only be able to do it in, let's say, the next, 1 month, because right now we don't have the capacity to do it. Then moving on, the last one, which is sort of linked to all the other goals that WHO lays out that we should be following, to pursue better mental health, which is whether or not you are able to make a contribution to your society. So I think just the nature of humanitarian work is as such that, you are in the social services. So you are working actually on an everyday basis to make society better by helping people out in different communities. But I mean, I think the problem is that there is a general perception that, like the level of sacrifice that you have to give in this sector is very, very high. That means that, your own personal life might not be working out very well, but you have to be available 24/7, like at your workplace, and your own personal problems are put aside for you to be able to, work better, you know, like at your workplace, which, as I've been talking about earlier, cannot happen. If you're not taking care of yourself as a person, you actually can't contribute better to society. So this sort of self-sacrificing perception actually needs to change, and that sort of change can only happen, like from the inside. Like it can't happen from the outside. Like you yourself have to understand that, with the stuff. So yeah, that's generally, the kind of things that I want to talk about. I kept it very short. If you have any more specific questions to ask me, like I'm sure the questions can help sort of cover other like dynamics.
Great. Thank you so much, Prerna. That was really wonderful. Well, it is indeed the need of the hour to think about serious consequences of adverse mental health of humanitarian workers who are tending to crises around the world that are on an increase anyway. So, great. I would love to open the floor for more questions. You know the drill, guys. Raise your hand and we'll call out on two people. Prerna, would you like to take these questions one by one or together?
We can take them one by one. That's fine.
Okay. Okay, great. So we have Divya has raised her hand. Divya, could you ask your question, please?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, thanks, Prerna, for a wonderful presentation. And I was just wondering if you could reflect a little more on the reporting relationship aspect, because I understand you said that the people you work with are the people who work under you in terms of the line relationship. How does that play out, and what are the challenges? And specifically in this sector, one can understand, but I transpose that to the business world, and I see a lot of challenges emerging. So just your thoughts on that based on your experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very, very interesting question, because I feel like the sort of structures that we have in place in a lot of professional workplaces have inherent power dynamics. There is a senior person that you're always supposed to report to. I mean, there are reasons why we do that, so that there is more workplace efficiency. But I think because of this inherent power dynamics, the responsibility for ensuring that reporting channels are actually transparent, they're accountable, and they follow like a two-way sort of communication actually depends like on the person supervising people. And I think like one of the ways in which you can make those reporting channels better, and I would implore like all supervisors, all managers to remember, for them to do this, is to actually remember when is it that they were in situations that they had to report, let's say, to bosses or to supervisors or to managers, and whether or not they felt comfortable doing that, whether or not they felt that it was a safe space or a safe person to report to. For us, the way it works is that we have a combined group chat that they can sort of like write to, but also every time they're flying in and out of Tunis, we make sure that we're meeting them one-on-one. So that means that there's another person who sort of reports to me, and then other staff members report to me, but they also have a direct line just directly to me and to other people in the organization. So for example, internally for us, we also have like an anonymous email address that they can write to. So for example, if they feel that there is a problem with the way I am addressing a certain challenge that they're facing, or if I'm not addressing it properly enough, they can actually write on this anonymous email address, which then goes on forward to our own accountability teams, who can then hold me accountable again. So I think it's very important, because there is an inherent power dynamic and there's an inherent structure in place. There also needs to be like a system or a department that needs to be working, which keeps me in check, which keeps me accountable, not just from the bottoms up, but also from the top down. I don't know if that like answered your question.
Yeah, no, that did. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
for sure.
Great, thank you. We would we'll take one more question. Arvind, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
So you mentioned you guys are carrying out project around hobbies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So hobby is basically an act of indulgence where it manifests into self-expression. So how do you assess it while during this project?
Sorry, can you repeat the last part? I didn't
said,
catch it.
How do you assess this, like quality of poetry or quality of painting or quality of any hobby? How do you assess it?
I mean, the thing is, for me, what is important to assess is whether the mood or the psychological state of the staff member who is pursuing that hobby has improved or not. So even if they make a picture of a person which looks like the sun, that's not something of like consequence to me. What is important for me is to understand and for me to know whether or not they feel better after doing that. So even if they've written like a poem which may not be the most poetic poem on the planet, if for example they come back to work the next day and they tell me that they actually feel much better and they actually want to take more initiatives, and they want to work a few extra hours on some things that have been pending on their TUR, and they're actually willing to do that, that for me is actually, like, personally for me, that would be the way for me to assess whether or not the hobby is helping them become better at their work or not.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Passing on to Mansi now.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Prerna. Thanks, Mamta. I don't know about
No
everyone
worries.
else. I'm feeling very de-stressed now after Prerna's presentation. It was really, really good. Thank you, Prerna.